Barbara has been living with MS for 7 years. Having lived with MS for the past 7 years, Barbara offers a uniquely personal and insightful perspective on why telling your MS healthcare team what you really want from life is essential. We will start out with Barbara introducing herself and her MS journey. Barbara is half Norwegian and will now introduce herself and explaining a little bit about her background in Norwegian.
Før jeg begynner, kan jeg lese noe på norsk?
Det kan du.
Takk skal du ha. Jeg er begeistret over å være her i dag, og takk for at dere lytter til meg. Min far hadde norsk arv, og jeg skulle ønske jeg hadde hatt muligheten til å lære norsk når jeg var barn. Men dessverre døde han av komplikasjoner av hans multiple sklerose, da jeg var veldig ung, i 1978.
Tusen takk, Barbara. I'm also Norwegian, so I can say that. So.
Vær så snill.
Veldig bra norsk, Barbara.
Takk skal du ha.
Can you tell us a bit more on how and why you got to focus on your priorities?
Yes, when I was first diagnosed, there were urgent priorities to focus on, such as finding a new job, because my employer sacked me for having MS, and making sure my son was safe going through school and felt okay because I was a single parent. So they were very urgent priorities. And then as time changed, time went on, and he was fine, and I got a new job with the guy over there. It was more about, what can I do for me? What priority did I have for the following year? So I decided to go back to university, and I'm now doing a PhD. So you talk about brain plasticity. I feel that by learning something new, I'm keeping that part of my brain active. So yeah, it was very important for me to set goals for myself every year and see how far I'd come and how far I'd changed.
That's wonderful. Do you talk to your neurologist about your focus priorities?
I do. I think it's very important for my neurologist to see me as a person. Of course, we all have MS. We all walk in as a patient with MS. I'm one of thousands on my neurologist's list. But I also want him to see what's important to me apart from MS, what's important to my life, how can I make it better, and what can I focus on? So yes, I do talk to him. I tell him my priorities, yeah.
That's good. And as we know, many healthcare personnels unfortunately have limited time within a consultation with their patients. But do you think it would be beneficial if the neurologist prioritized asking you about your priorities and goals in life, and why?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I think it is. It's a two-way process. We can't just expect a neurologist to say, well, what are you going to focus on this year? I think it's important that we walk into that consultation having thought about it beforehand, and also taking a notebook, write down everything that's happened to you as time goes on over the previous year, and then sit down with him and say, this is what I'm going to focus on this year. And ultimately, I do believe it could save your neurologist time. You get a far better consultation. You can use the time far more effectively, rather than a neurologist kind of probing, well, how are you doing? If you just set the agenda straight away, what is your focus? What is your priority? And then they can flip back over the years very quickly with your file. And it does set a very positive tone for the consultation, I think, as well as rather than just focusing on physical symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's very smart. And what one question do you wish your neurologist asked during appointments in order to better understanding your priorities in life? And how often should this question be asked, do you think?
Well, I see my neurologist once a year and my MS nurse once a year, 6 months apart for each appointment. So they always ask you, so how have you been? I would like my neurologist to say, okay, how have you been since I saw you last? But what are you planning? What's your plan for the next year until I see you again? So I think that'd be very nice if my neurologist asked me that. I should be talking to him in a couple of weeks, so I'll try it out.
It's very clear to us now, Barbara, that you truly believe that having a dialogue having the dialogue on your priorities and goals in life, what you really want from life, is essential and should be put into a dialogue with your MS healthcare team.
Yeah.
As Annette mentioned in the opening, is one of the posts ended with a sentence, "If only there was time to discuss my priorities with my neurologist." What are your thoughts about this?
I think that's a really important point, and it's something we hear time and time again. And I think that by focusing on our patient priorities, it does free up a lot of time. It does cut away some of the dead wood that can happen in consultations. There can be a lot of, as I said before, probing and trying to find out. But if we immediately go in with this, what is your priority? How did your last one go? How can we help you with the future one? You get a much bigger half-hour appointment, more bang for your buck in that way.
Yeah.
We only see them once a year, so they've got to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And focusing on these priorities is a great way to start that discussion.
It was.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barbara.
Are there any questions?
Yes, are there any
We
questions
have some
for
time
Barbara?
for questions. Someone put me on the spot. Come on. Test my brain. Test my plasticity.
Make it.
Hi.
For sharing your
You're
story.
welcome.
I'm a doctor working with MS here in Copenhagen, and you're saying something very important, because that how can we actually address both things, because you also want me as a doctor to make sure that you have no evidence of disease activity, and to sort of incorporate that in what your plans are. So how do you feel about how shall I as a doctor prioritize the time? Have you any?
I do try to see it from, say, my neurologist's point of view. You know, we can't expect too much, because I'm one person. They've got thousands on their books. I do appreciate that, but that's what I meant about just focusing on that one question. If you could just ask that one thing, apart from all the health-related questions, then perhaps it's important for me because it makes me think, and it's also important to know that you're treating me holistically. I'm not just an MS patient to you. I'm an MS patient who happens to have a whole different life out there. And I think just that one question might make me feel more human.
Yeah, so
in some ways.
I understand.
Does that make sense?
Very much indeed. So that how can we integrate the working with sort of the most measurable things like MRI and stuff like that, and put that into your life perspective? I think that's. I don't have the answer myself completely now, but I think that's a question to be asked.
It's not about having like a therapy session or anything. It's more just, okay, how are you doing? So am I. That's great. What's your focus? And then we'll move on to looking at your MRI results, you know, and stuff like that. So it's just making me feel valued as a patient, and that my priorities are important, as well as your priorities as a physician. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Anna Cunningham. I am an MS nurse working in Stockholm. And my question for you is, what does your MS nurse do?
Oh, she's wonderful. I'm so lucky. I live in South Wales, in Cardiff, and we've got 6 or 7 MS nurses there. And I still have the first one I was given all those years ago.
Continuity is...
It's wonderful.
It's
You know, so what she does is she lets me cry. We're talking like, she had her before I was diagnosed, when I was in the CIS phase. So it's gone from me crying down the phone, crying on her shoulder, telling her my life is over, to her championing me the whole way, to just being that eternal figure of advice and help and normality. And obviously, she's got time to take more interest in me holistically, and also reassurance. And no matter what I ask, like, my nose keeps itching, is this normal? And she'll say yes. And it doesn't matter what I you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter what I ask her, she doesn't make me feel ridiculous for asking. And I guess you do the same with your patients. Yeah. No, she's fantastic. She's called Jackie, by the way. Jackie Smee, if you've ever heard of her. Yeah.
I also have a question about, do you do any assessment before your visit to your neurologist or the MS nurse?
In what way? What, am I sent one to do beforehand, or?
No, in Sweden, in our outpatient clinic, we have the patient log in online and they do an assessment, quality of life questionnaires, Guy's neurological scale to kind of
right.
doing like an online inventory about your different symptoms. For example, balanced bladder, bowel movements,
That's
spasticity,
interesting.
fatigue. So
No,
when the patient walks into my room, I have it all on
yeah,
the screen, and I don't have to ask all those unnecessary
yeah.
questions that takes up a lot of time. I can say, okay, according to the scale, these are your problems. Is that what you want to discuss today, or do you have anything else that you
We
want to
do it
prioritize?
differently. We do it retrospect. Well, they send us a questionnaire after our appointment.
Huh?
Yeah, I know. It's
Not
we're
very
just
useful.
thinking. I'm going to go back home and tell them to do it the other way around. Because
They can contact me. I'll let
yeah,
them know.
because funny enough, I've just been involved in redesigning the questionnaire because it was so depressing. It looked like a death notice, basically, coming through the post. So we sat down with a focus group and redesigned the whole thing. But I will mention sending it beforehand. But on that note as well, I don't know if you've heard of the work that the MS Register is doing in the UK. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're planning a very similar system where we can log on, do questionnaires. We've been doing it as part of a university project, but they want to create an electronic calling card that we can take with us in the virtual world to our appointments. The nurse can log on and see at a glance how we're doing with graphs and everything. So it's the way forward.
Yeah, we have a Swedish National Quality Register for MS, and we've had since '99. So
You guys are way ahead of us.
working. That's where we have these questionnaires, so it's incorporated
Yeah.
into. We get graphs
Yeah.
on how the patient are doing compared to all the patients in the country, 20,000 patients.
Well, I've got my MRI next week, so I'm going to mention, hang on, why not send it out before the appointment?
Why don't you come for a study visit?
To Sweden. Absolutely. Did you hear that? It's on record, okay? I've been invited to Sweden. You heard. You should come as well.
Yes, we should take a group trip and just visit.
Fantastic,
Yeah,
yeah.
nice.
It's on record. Another question.
Okay.
Hiya.
My name is Finn Bosen. I am neurologist at the MS hospitals in Denmark.
Hi.
You look like being a well-informed person,
Thank you.
prepared to the meeting with the professionals. I have to ask you, do you feel treated with dignity when you are at these meetings? And do you feel that they listen enough their time to listen to your own experience about your disease?
Can I be really honest?
Please.
The first couple of appointments with my neurologist were horrendous. I left crying. I wasn't treated in a way that I felt I should be treated. I wasn't taken seriously. I was dismissed out of hand. This is before I was diagnosed, and yet I knew I was getting worse and worse and worse. It was a case of, it's all in your head, kind of thing. It took a couple of years to get back on track from that. It was very, very bad, but luckily I am quite outspoken, so I wasn't going to accept that. Obviously, I worry about people that haven't quite got the courage to stand up. That is a problem, I think, in every country. You know, we need to reach out to the people that don't have a voice. You know, I changed my situation round, but you're absolutely right. It does happen, doesn't it? Some consultations can be difficult for patients to navigate. And hopefully that's something we're working on with the World versus MS. We're creating programs and strategies to help people become more informed patients. So fingers crossed it's working. What do you think, Mariana?
Yes, I would think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's a tricky question.
Yeah.
I ask,
But it's an important question.
Yeah.
do you feel that the neurologists respect other issues like mood, resilience, coping strategies? Do they ask about these things
Not
besides the physical?
particularly. No. Mine does now because I tell him. So I kind of force him. I'm like, right, I'm going to tell you now. This is how I've been. This is what I'm going to do. And I think he's very proud of everything I'm doing, so maybe he takes more interest. That does go more to the MS nurses, I guess, that side of it. But I think it's important for neurologists to see us as humans. I don't know what neurologists actually feel themselves. Is it difficult for you to switch off from the brain scans and the figures and see us as human beings? What would you say? Do you think?
You would hear my perspective
Ah, right. That's interesting. Well, we'll hear the other side of the table then, won't we? So yeah, as I said before, it's a two-way process. I'm not expecting all the work to come from the neurologist. I think the patients have a part to play as well. If you're not happy with something, I think there needs to be something in place. Go to your MS nurse, for example, and tell them that you don't feel that you can tell your neurologist what you want to. So yeah, it's very important that patients take responsibility as well, I think. I hope that answers your question.
I think that's about it.
That's about it.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was really good. Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah, it's cool. Oh.